You're not seeing my face. Up higher. Up higher. Gee, how do I do it?
Wait a second. Oh, I see what's going on.
You're shooting yourself when you think you're shooting me.
There.
But I can't see myself.
I can see you.
Not my body, right?
No, not your body.
I can't see what I look like. I don't want to talk if I can't see myself.
Oh. Oh, okay. Well, let's see how we'll. Yes. There we go. Say hello.
Good morning. Oh, shoot. It's Tuesday. Got my mask. Got my grocery list. Got my insulated bags. I'm going to go buy things at Sprouts. Got veggies, fruit. God knows what else.
You're the best dressed girl in the convent this morning.
I dress like a nun when I go shopping.
Okay, roll down the window there for me, dear, because it's 120 degrees.
No, it's not yet. Next week it'll be 120.
Okay. Let me turn this around here. Oh, yes, I still have to turn this around. There we go. Sorry we're late this morning. Here, I got my chicken hat on. It's really not 120. It will be 120 on Sunday, they predict. Okay. It's anyway, it's Uncertainty Tuesday, as we should probably call it, because it's shopping day. And but I got fun stuff here. Now, yesterday I started reading Knowing Aleister Crowley personally, which was a 3-part series published in the OTO newsletter, or the Magical Link. I think it's still called the newsletter, in 1979. And it is Grady McMurtry in his unique and colorful style, relating a couple stories about his time in London during the war, or in England during the war, because there's more than London, with visiting Aleister Crowley. Now, because he was a lieutenant in the U.S. Army, he had access to a Jeep and petrol, and could get around. And he was the only member of the American OTO to visit Crowley during the war. Now, anyone who knew Grady and had a chance and the privilege of spending time with Grady was charmed, truly charmed, by his flow of consciousness, his especially when he was describing things. And there's great magical insights and information and, dare I say, secrets just nestled in his conversation. But a lot of his conversations were heavily peppered with reminiscences of his wartime experiences. And at first you thought, oh, this is just, my uncle was always talking about this time in the war. He sort of explains. Grady was active in the D-Day invasion of Normandy, and then after World War II, he went on to be involved in the Korean conflict. So Grady was quite the military man. And it was one of the reasons that Crowley put this in writing. It was one of the reasons that Crowley was chosen to succeed Carl Germer, or at least Crowley said he envisioned that. One of the reasons was that in the age of Horus, Crowley thought it was important that for the survival of the OTO, that it be led by somebody that had actual experience in war. And maybe one day we'll get into that when I'll read Crowley's letters, the authorization letters to Crowley. But today we're going to go into the mind of Grady L. McMurtry, Lieutenant Grady L. McMurtry. I think he retired as a major. From part 2 of the Equinox Volume 3. This is Grady talking, okay? As I mentioned in my last rap, 93 Jermyn Street is just off of Piccadilly Circus in London. A circus is a roundabout, a circle where traffic flows in and out. Piccadilly Circus has traditionally had a statue of Eros, or Cupid, on the island in the center. Taken down during the war, of course. They couldn't take down Nelson's monument in Trafalgar Square, so they sandbagged it. Anyway, and for whatever reason, it was the habit at that time, 1943 and 44, for all the young ladies of London who wanted to, for fun and profit, to come down and blanket the walls of the various, blanket the walls while the various clientele, mostly American soldiers, considered the prospects. The comments one heard while passing could be rather startling. I remember being jolted out of my satori one evening by some broad yelling, "Get your hand off my CUNT." During a particular point when they were negotiating as to who was to sleep with whom and where and how much for the night. We had a saying in the American Army, if you could put a roof over Piccadilly Circus, you would have the biggest whorehouse in the world. Whether Crowley ever made use of the local availability, I have no idea. But it did set a certain tone. Okay. Speaking of sex, the question has arisen as to whether Crowley ever made any homosexual advances to me. The answer is no. For a confirmatory opinion, see The Eye in the Triangle by Dr. Israel Regardi, Llewellyn Publications, St. Paul. The Aleister Crowley I knew had the greatest respect for the right of an individual to manifest their will without interference. The only time the subject ever came up was by accident and a joke. One day he was telling me about how he had been at a party the previous evening. From his description, I got the idea that the people who attended were mostly artist, bohemian persuasion, but elderly. Because, as he said, despite their age, they were all jumping about as, quote, as spry as crickets. Whereupon I made some inane comment to the effect that I would rather have liked to have been there. His reply was rather devastating. He said, and I quote, "Oh, you'd have just gotten yourself buggered." Considering my physical strength at the time, it does not that does seem unlikely. But anyway, it was all... I love how Grady bounces back and forth with these subjects. It was, I'm sure Heydrich took this from dictation and did a marvelous job. Anyway, it was also here at 93 Jermyn Street that a German bomb had landed in his backyard, blowing glass from the window all over his bed. And as he said to me at the time, if I had been home, I would have been killed. This shook his nerves a bit. He, along with Lady Frida and many other Britishers, determined that the German bombing would not drive them out of London. The old British bulldog spirit. As to whether any of this on Crowley's part had to do with any remorse over his pro-German activities during the in the U.S. during World War I cannot say. So as far as I'm concerned, he was just being the typical Britisher he'd always been. Crowley was in the tradition of the radical conservative. On one hand, there is nothing more radical than Thelema. On the other hand, he was a monarchist. He could never forgive Edward VIII for having abdicated his throne to marry a commoner. After all, the office of royal consort had been approved in European royalty for centuries. Speaking as an old combat trooper, I can report with great authenticity that being next to a bomb going off will do something to you. What it does mostly is make your nerves a lot more frangible. So if sometimes my hand shakes a little, and maybe I drink more than is good for me, believe me, I have reasons. When the Chinese hit the Kumwa Ridge with a human wave that went on for a solid week in October of '52, I was ammo supply central on the Central Front, Korea. But that's another Grady story, he says. Back to Crowley. As a result of German bombing, he decided he needed more quiet. Can't say I blame him. I thought it was dumb enough to stay in London to begin with, but I didn't tell him that. So he looked around and decided to move to the Bell Inn at Ashton Clinton, Bucks County. I think that means Buckingham. There is a whole history of England, and here's Grady digressed as much as I did here. I do. There's a whole history of England written in county names. The painted counties. Yes, I saw it once when I was running east on highway over the West Country, whose perfect patches of agriculture, each its own color. Essex means East Saxons. Wessex means West Saxons. Sussex means South Saxons. Northumberland means the pits. That's Robin Hood country, about 30 miles north of London. Of course, London goes on forever. The Bell Inn is an authentic country inn. It still has a courtyard where the stagecoaches stop to load and unload. I was still up in East Anglia at Bury Street, Edmonds at the time. Now, England is built very much like Italy or Korea when it comes to roads. All roads lead to London, Rome, or Seoul, as is the case may be. To cut across country is a problem. Add to that the fact that the British had taken down all the road signs in case of German invasion, which was not at all unlikely. But I had a very beautiful red Morocco-bound quarto-size map book, so I never really had any problems negotiating the terrain. From a recent film, the Eagle has landed. It's quite obvious that the Germans had just as good a road map. So why did the British take down all the road signs? Well, you're at war and you have to do something. Even if it only kept up your morale. I fogged my way across country, wandering wondering at the convoys of British trucks that did not have front-wheel drive. Sure enough, they bogged down in the mud of Italy, while those American GMCs, deuce and a halves, went plowing sturdily through. Bugged the hell out of the British newspaper correspondents at the time, and those colorful Royal Corps of signals. On their messenger motorbikes with their funny helmets and their fantastic yellow gloves with long gauntlets to cover their wrists. I really did not have all that much trouble in finding Ashton Clinton. Not at all like the time in Korea when I wanted to drive from Kuchon over to the Western Front without bothering to drive all the way into Seoul. I found myself on a washed-out road on a mountain pass up to the fan belt and flooding stream without a bridge, when a squad of Koreans burst out of the cane in full camouflage combat regalia. I damn near shit my pants while grabbing for my carbine in the back of the Jeep. Turned out they were just ROK troops on maneuvers, but for a horrible second I didn't know that. Well, anyway, back to Crowley. Like I said, naturally I was in uniform. Not only was there a war on, but I had taken the morning off from my duties as company commander to grab the company Jeep and go over to see Crowley. I walked into the desk. Oh, and here, hang on for a second. There's this diagram is readable. This is the Ashton Inn thing. It's a very small room. You can see the door there. And then there's his table with the two chairs for playing chess. And that far side thing is his bed. Let's see. I walked to the desk on the right. The dining room is on the left as you walk in. I asked the clerk how I could find Mr. Crowley. He said, "Oh, right up those stairs, on the right, down the corridor to the left, and it's room number so-and-so," which I've forgotten. So I go pounding up the stairs with me combat boots on, found the door on the right and pounded on it. I heard some unintelligible sound, so I pounded again. This time I heard a voice saying very distinctly, "Who is it?" Since I was talking to a piece of wood at the door, and there seemed to be a problem with communication, I said very loudly, "Lieutenant McMurtry." The door opened and there was Crowley. He took one look at me and said, "Oh, there you are, dear chap. Come right on in." Then he paused, looked puzzled for a second, and said, "That's strange. When I was taking the I Ching this morning, it said that I would be meeting a military man." I walked in as best as memory serves. This is what the pad looked like. And there it is again. The A is the door, B the row of windows over on what seemed to be the north wall, with C the bed under them. D was a round table piled high with proof sheets, which must have been for magic without tears. He sat down in E and I sat down in F. There may have been other furniture in the room, but I do not remember. He said, "Pardon me a minute." He was in progress of taking an oracle from the I Ching. It was the one time I saw him using his I Ching sticks, which I was able to recover from the library after the court order decreeing that his library belonged to the OTO under my conservatorship. They look like this, and I've showed you before sort of my my set of sticks. The blank side is the male, yang energy side. The divided side looks like red nail polish to me. There was a strip of red nail polish down the center of them. This is the female, yin, receptive side. By my ruler, they're less than 1/8 of an inch in thickness, but slightly more than a 1/16. They were either of mahogany or teak or stained dark to look so. Each stick has a yang side and a yin side. The way Crowley used them was to shuffle them, his eyes closed, then take them one at a time, and holding each one upright with his right forefinger, eyes still closed, get a signal and lay it down, either right or left. First stick down is the bottom line. You can also get moving lines this way. If one of the sticks wants to move when you lay it down, just shove it right or left as indicated. Personally, I like this method of taking the oracle. It gives you the chance for your angel to communicate directly through your fingertip. Of course, one must always be wary of lying and malicious spirits. I forget exactly what we talked about, but I do remember that it was a happy reunion and a heartwarming experience. Crowley could be a wonderful person when he wanted to be. As for the irascible side of his nature, I personally do not think he would have brought down the book of the law unless he had been authentically the great wild beast of the aeon. I met him once more, Christmas of 1944, but more of that next time in Hastings. That's where Crowley died. And that's the end of part 2 of remembering or knowing Aleister Crowley personally by Caliph Hymenaeus Alpha 777, or at this time Major Grady L. McMurtry. Anyway, thank you for being patient, and I know we were about a half hour late, but until tomorrow, continue to be good to yourself and be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will.